Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back. I'm Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections and your host of this episode of the Networking RX podcast. Thanks again for listening, subscribing, and referring others, and certainly thanks for comments and questions. Those are always very helpful. As I've said before, and I will say again and continue to say, networking is about relationships, and much of building and maintaining relationships involves communications. To this point, we've devoted several episodes in this podcast series to communications, both verbal and nonverbal. To list a few, in episode 11, Networking Small Talk, we shared not only why casual chit-chat is a powerful networking tool, but also how to become great at it. As a summary, the key to creating great small talk conversation is having an arsenal of questions that serve to get the other person talking. In episode 17, Networking Conversation Carriers, which was a follow-up to episode 11, we shared and commented on small talk questions that had been submitted by you, our listeners. In episode 19, Creating Networking Recall, we established that to be known, liked, and trusted, one must be remembered, and with that we shared 5 tactics you can use to ensure you're remembered. As a follow-up to this, in episode 33, Networking and Nonverbal Communications, we shared research on powerful nonverbal communication and how it can help make us memorable. And then finally, at least thus far, in episode 39, Box the Conversation, using boxing as an analogy, we showed how you can use simple closed-end questions to help move small talk along. We'll continue to devote time and episodes to communications as it's important, actually vital to great networking. As you know, there are 2 sides to communications. There's the output, the things we communicate, and the input, the things we allow others to communicate. Years ago, someone shared with me a quote. I'm not sure where they got this quote, but the quote is, "God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to make the point that listening is far more important." Obviously, that quote suggests that we allow others to communicate, and that's important. But the key to great communication or conversation has to be about more than just getting the other person talking. In fact, equally important to allowing others to communicate is communicating back that we're listening. In fact, there are some communication experts who consider good listening an even greater accomplishment than speaking well. Now, that's certainly a matter of opinion, and it's really not worth the time and energy to debate. What I can say, however, is that, and this is just my opinion, nothing to back it up with, but listening well takes a lot of energy, a lot more energy than talking. When I listen, I mean really listen, I can feel my brain churning away. When I talk, especially on topics I've thought a lot about, like, say, networking, if you can believe that, when I talk, my brain can go on to sort of autopilot. It just cues up my mouth to spew out scripts that seem to be recorded in my mind. Again, I have no empirical evidence that listening takes more energy than talking, but think about it. When you're on a sales call with a VIP client who represents a big sale, i.e. a big commission, you make the best impression by listening intently to what he or she has to say, asking insightful questions, and then paying attention to the answers as if your livelihood depends on it. And to a degree it does. Then when the VIP client asks you a question about you, the company you represent, or the products or services that you offer, like magic, your brain kicks in and plays track number 4 on side A of the album known as All the Great Things About What I Have to Offer. Whatever the case, whether I'm right or wrong, I think that we all agree that we're drawn to people who make us feel special. And one of the best ways to make someone feel special is by listening to them. Listening seems to do it every time. In fact, the people I tend to like the most are the people who are interested in what I have to say. So listening is important. And while we're allowing others to communicate, we need to communicate back that we're listening. So here are 5 ways to communicate listening. The first I'll call look, lean, and nod. As you listen, maintain eye contact, certainly without staring or glaring. I once read that 70% of our time as we're trying to maintain eye contact, your eyes should be connected to theirs. The other 30% focus on other parts of them. Don't check your phone, your watch, or look at action over their shoulder. The only exception to this is if there's a reason for it and you communicate it to them ahead of time. For example, something like, I don't mean to be rude in looking over your shoulder from time to time, but there's someone meeting me here today, and I told them that I'd be on the lookout for them. In fact, when they get here, I'll introduce you. Other than that, don't be looking over their shoulder, don't check your phone, don't look at your watch. In addition to reasonable eye contact, lean slightly forward. I'm not suggesting that you be weird and invade their space, but lean in to communicate that you're open to what they're saying. Finally, from time to time, nod and throw in an occasional mm-hmm. This sends a nonverbal signal, I guess partially verbal, signal that you're in the moment and involved in the conversation. The second thing to communicate listening is open up and relax. It's natural to feel tense in certain situations, but if you want to socialize and meet people, you should try to conceal your nervousness as best as possible. It's only human nature, but we have a tendency to fold up when we feel uncomfortable or threatened. We'll cross our arms, legs, or ankles, shift in our seat, put our hands in our pockets, and angle our body away. These postures, in effect, disconnect or close us off from the person who's speaking, and tends to communicate that we're not really listening. Again, this is only human nature, but be mindful of it. I catch myself from time to time crossing my arms. To be honest, I can't pinpoint exactly why I might be uncomfortable or threatened. I just trust that my subconscious has picked up on something. Now, as long as I'm not in some dark alley talking to a shady stranger, I rationalize that I'm not at risk and I'll force myself to uncross my arms and just relax. I might put my hands on my hips or put them in front of me, or a combination of those. This is part of the reason that you might like having a drink in your hands, a beer, a cup of coffee, or a bottle of water. Nervousness, uneasiness can manifest itself in many other ways. Common sides could be fussing with your hair, jewelry, or clothing, adjusting a tie, clearing your throat every few minutes, let's say, repeatedly clicking a ballpoint pen. To be honest, as I tape this podcast, I usually have a ballpoint pen in my hand, and I catch myself doing that. It can be any number of things. Again, these are just natural. Being nervous is just natural. And while you should be listening to the person while you've got them talking, but take a moment to be aware of what you're doing and try and adjust for that. The point is, do what you need to just relax, take a few deep breaths, and listen. The third thing is focus on their agenda. From time to time, I'll be in a conversation, the other person engaged me and has got me talking. They've earned an A+ for that, an A+ in the fine art of small talk. Then they'll ask me a question that's totally unrelated to what they originally got me talking about. Something out of left field. So are you happy with your financial advisor? And I'm like, who? What? Why did you ask that? In those moments, I immediately get the sense that they weren't listening to what I was saying. They were just hopeful of getting me talking, comfortable in conversation, and then turn the conversation to what was on their mind. If you want to communicate that you're listening, don't steer the conversation. Go with the flow. Networking is about building relationships. Again, say that again, not setting people up for a sale. Explore what they have to say. Explore them. Just it's got a natural flow to it. It reminds me of a story several years ago. There's a friend of mine, Jared Cummins. He was at a networking event and happened to be talking to somebody, and Jared was in the printing industry at that point. He happened to be talking to somebody, and their son had recently been deployed overseas with the military. And Jared could just sense that that's what the person wanted to talk about. And Jared just went with the flow. Those were the questions. He allowed that person to kind of talk and continue on with respect to this person's son being overseas. And this kind of leads into number 4. Number 4 is summarize and inquire. Listen to what they have to say, share a quick thought relative to the conversation, then make another inquiry, ask another question that keeps the person on that same general theme. That's what Jared did in that situation. He would just follow up with a question, make a remark, ask a question, but kept the person talking, allowed the person to talk about their son. What became of that is that Jared never got to talk about his business in that moment, but that next week the individual called him up, had his business card, called Jared up and said, "Hey, listen, we talked a lot about my situation. I would like to learn a little bit more about you. Let's go have coffee." So it did work out for Jared in the end, and it worked out because Jared allowed the person to talk. People perk up when we demonstrate a focused and sincere interest in them, in their stories, on what they have to say. If you take an active interest in the lives of those around you, people will remember you and they'll appreciate you for making that effort. Again, using a theme we've talked about in the past, they'll come to know you, like you, and trust you. Remember those words? Here's the reality. Active listening will make you more memorable than you imagine. The willingness to step outside yourself and your concerns it's a form of generosity or compassion. It serves to acknowledge them. Again, they can't help but trust you, know you, like you, and trust you. The 5th thing is adjust your communication style. I had a conversation with an attorney that I know, Josh Gianni, and he shared with me that when he meets with clients, that's one of the things that he listens for. He listens for how his clients talk. Some of his clients, and he's an attorney, some of his clients come in and they're very calm, and his demeanor then will be very calm. Some of his clients will come in and they're very agitated, almost angry, and he'll try and mimic that. No matter who you are, you don't need to be an attorney, but no matter who you are, you need to be flexible in how you communicate, as over time you're going to interact with a wide variety of people. Your success depends on your ability to adjust your communication styles to match the behavioral style or the communication style of the people you're talking to. People won't subconsciously know what you're doing. They won't rationalize to themselves, okay, he's talking just like me, he must be listening. The impact of this will be subtle. Subconsciously, people will, again, know you, like you, and trust you as you mimic them. And this is something that's been demonstrated in study after study. To summarize this entire episode, listening is important. And so while you're allowing others to communicate, you need to communicate back to them that you're listening. And you can do that by looking them in the eye, leaning forward, nodding occasionally, opening up in those conversations and relaxing. Focus on their agenda. Don't steer the conversation. From time to time, summarize what they've said and then follow up with a little inquiry. And then finally, adjust your communication styles to match theirs. To wrap up, remember AmSpirit Business Connections has a unique franchise opportunity that involves helping small business professionals become more successful through a referral-based program. It only involves a couple hours in the morning, a few days a week, and would be a great franchise for an attorney, accountant, realtor, business coach, or consultant to add on to what they're already doing. Why just be a renter when you can own the building? Why just be in a business network when you can own the business network? If you or someone you know would like to learn more, please contact me using the email at the end of the program or in the show notes.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.